So I'm going to spend the next 12 to 15 minutes providing an overview and a perspective on what we mean by the service-driven network. So let me start a little bit with sort of setting the stage. So service providers are once again under pressure. Data demand is driving, accelerating very, very rapidly. The infrastructure models that we have today in terms of networks are unsustainable. There is a imperative to drive new revenue sources, given traditional revenue sources are flattening out. And then, new web and cloud company entrants and alliances are shaking up the marketplace and creating a new competitive dynamic. But what we're seeing is service providers are responding. They're sort of starting the transition from traditional communication service providers to digital service providers. They're moving from monolithic network domains to modular architectures, moving from closed systems to open systems, transitioning from static networks to dynamic and automated networks, going from siloed stacks to fully integrated network plus IT solutions, and then finally transitioning from virtual physical appliances to virtualized and cloud infrastructures. And so the network disruption is already beginning to happen. There's one other additional pressure that service providers are facing, and not necessarily here in the US. This is a phenomenon that's happening elsewhere. Political and regulatory forces are leading the process to break up monopolies and disaggregate the networks and create, netcos and servcos with the intention to try and get new players to be able to deliver a broader set of services. So for example, in March 2018, the EU began work on a lighter regulatory framework for broadband wholesale providers. And again, the goal being to encourage the large integrated service providers to start becoming wholesale broadband providers as well. And there's some examples of this already happening or in the process of happening. So British Telecom, Telecom Italia, Bezeq, Telstra are examples who are already accelerating and delivering the broadband wholesale provider model. There's also pressure from the investor community on service providers on how to better leverage the network infrastructure investments being made, to deliver different types of services and business models. Now, interestingly, what we're seeing is there's a conversation that's increasingly happening on the potential benefits of breaking up and splitting up the network. Service providers are looking at the opportunity to drive new revenues with new creative business models being built on top of these disaggregated networks. And there is a case to be made in making the core network capabilities available as a service, to different servcos or enterprises or over-the-top providers or cloud vendors in a seamless manner. And doing this will allow the creation of advanced solutions and business models, to be delivered on top of these network capabilities. But there has to be a different approach to the network to enable this. And so the question is, what is that approach? And that's what I'll spend a few more minutes describing what we call the service-driven network approach. So this approach, we at Amdocs call it the service-driven network, as do others. It's really all about essentially a comprehensive set of tools and capabilities that sit between the network and the business support layer. And what these capabilities allow is service providers can much more flexibly, quickly, with agility, create, launch, and deliver new services that are composed from their own capabilities as well as those of our partner ecosystem. So that's one part of it. The second part of it, what a service-driven network allows service providers to do is enable and assure these services by taking into account the end-to-end service context. So how exactly will this be done is really by having a dynamic programmable network and having network as a service capabilities, but also having data-driven intelligence and automated network operations solutions. So let me go one level deeper and give you a practical example of what we mean by this. So Amdocs is working with a large service provider in APAC, and that service provider is attempting to solve the problem of long lead times as well as bespoke solutions for the new services, primarily in the enterprise domain. So what they're doing is they're creating an abstraction layer on top of their network, and they're exposing atomic capabilities as service components. So now their product managers can go in and quickly construct end-to-end service solutions, in a much more easy and flexible and quick manner. Now, not only can the end-to-end service be defined, designed, launched, and deployed and fulfilled much more rapidly, but also, once the service is up and running, it's much more easy to respond to deviations from the service intent, and also much more easy to address new requirements as well. Now, all of this requires, a fairly sophisticated set of capabilities. You need to have the service design capabilities and the service design process supported. The capability set needs to have strong orchestration and also needs to have analytics capabilities to support the real-time network and the real-time behavior within the network. So here's an example of service-driven network capabilities sitting between the core network and the business support systems, the care, commerce systems, and really exposing those capabilities to allow construction of services much more rapidly, but also assuring those services by accounting for the service context. Let me give you another example of a service-aware network. So there is a demonstration here in the proof of concept showcase, and this is a joint solution by AT&T, Fujitsu, Iometrics, and Amdocs. And in this solution, AT&T as the service provider, and that's the scenario, is offering a managed CPE service to Marriott hotels. And what a hotel employee can do is order internet and SD-WAN services. And also the hotel employee can specify the intent profile for those services. A customer can come along and using the portal register for the internet services, but also query and request corporate access services. Now, when the guest is moving around the hotel, so for example, if the guest goes from the main building to the beachside cabana, the network takes into account the customer location and adjusts to that guest location. And the network manages the operations to maintain and satisfy the service intent bounds. So that's kind of an example of how the network's adjusting depending on where the location is of the guest. Additionally, depending on the type of use, so if the customer is using a simple video service, then the solution will leverage a standard internet connection. But when that customer is delivering a training session from the conference room and they're there for an event, it'll switch to using the SD-WAN connection. Again, based on the intent and the priorities. What's critical is that the overlying service is the same and the network is adjusting underneath in order to deliver the service priorities and fulfill the service intent. So again, another simple example of a network that's service aware and adjusting itself based on the service priorities and service intent. And again, this is a demonstration in the proof of concept showcase upstairs. Building on the previous example of the POC, now what does this mean for 5G? So if you look forward to 5G networks, these new evolving architectures are going to be much more dynamic. They're going to have a much broader ecosystem of capabilities built into it. And in fact, these networks will be more amenable to expanding the ecosystem of providers who can assemble new, innovative, targeted B2B or B2B2C solutions on top of these 5G infrastructures. But it's going to require a service-driven network approach. That's going to be key to unleashing the potential of these 5G networks. So another example where Amdocs is pushing the bounds on service-driven network is a solution jointly developed by Intel and Mavenir Network. So we've created a blueprint and a reference design of a mobile network platform that contains a rich set of virtualized functions. It has infrastructure management tools built into it. It has service orchestration capabilities. And these capabilities span the RAN, the edge, and the core. Different services can be designed, defined, supported, leveraging the service-driven network capabilities of the platform. And we've demonstrated this for a number of services, including augmented reality for VIP customers in a stadium setting. So again, here's an example of a service-aware, service-driven solution that is based on fulfilling the needs of the service and the service intent. Now, in order to be successful in realizing a service-driven approach, there are a number of key considerations that need to be accounted for. The first one is a commitment and an adoption of standardized and open solutions. This is going to be critical, and partly because these services are going to span a broad distributed ecosystem of vendor capabilities. So openness and standardization are fundamental to making a service-driven network approach be realized successfully. The second thing is the network components themselves need to be service-aware, because these elements and components will be acting and reacting in real time to the specific service priorities and the service intent. And then the final piece is the expertise required to realize a service-driven network spans network expertise, IT expertise, and cloud know-how, because all these things need to come together to make this successfully happen. So these are kind of three key considerations that need to be accounted for when embarking and moving forward with the service-driven network journey. So in conclusion, when you think about what the opportunity is, making the core network capabilities available as a service will allow advanced solutions and business models on top of existing network infrastructures and new network infrastructures. Adopting a service-driven network approach will allow service providers to much more flexibly, quickly create, design, deliver new services, again, composed from their own capabilities as well as capabilities of the broader partner ecosystem. More importantly, having a service-driven network approach will allow service providers to accurately and reliably assure and enable these services by accounting for the end-to-end service context. So it's a new way of doing things, and again, as I mentioned before, it's a set of capabilities that sit between the core network and the business enablement layers and really enable this ability to create and launch services quickly and enable and assure these in a service context-full manner, taking into account the service intent and the service priorities. So I am around here today. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, and thank you very much.